The hail was 43 minutes away when Grant Vale realized that $4 million of perfect machinery had become $4 million of furniture. His autonomous combines sat in the wheat like stranded ships, their glass cabs glowing red with the same warning on every screen. Position integrity fault, safety lock engaged, contact dealer support. Grant stood ankle-deep in mud, one hand pressed against the cold track of the nearest machine, the other shaking around a phone that had already told him the truth. The network was down. The unlock server was down. The dealer PIN system was down. And above the western tree line, a black wall of hail was swallowing the last clean light of the day. He had laughed at old machines. He had called them museum pieces, rust wagons, dead weight from a dead way of life. Then, over the wind, he heard an engine coughing itself awake. Not a turbine, not a computer-managed diesel, not anything that belonged in the glossy future he had sold to investors. It was a ragged, metallic bark from a 6-cylinder engine that had been old before Grant was born. Down County Road 14 came a faded silver combine with patched sheet metal, crooked lights, and a man sitting out in the open air like he was riding into a war. Cal Mercer had spent 30 years being told that his machine was obsolete. On that night, obsolete was the only thing still moving. Cal Mercer was 71 years old, with shoulders bent by weather and hands that looked carved instead of born. He farmed 280 acres outside Bellwether, Kansas, a narrow strip of ground wedged between dry creek bed, rail line, and the spreading acreage of Vale harvest systems. His barn leaned slightly east. His pickup had one blue door and one white door. His jeans were permanently stained with grease no washing machine could remove. And under the north lean-to of that barn sat the thing everybody in Bellwether had an opinion about. A 1963 Gleaner C2 combine. The old machine was the color of dull galvanized steel, not pretty and not trying to be. A red stripe still clung to one side, sunburned almost pink. Its unloading auger sagged a little at the hinge. Its cab had been removed decades ago, leaving only a battered umbrella frame and a metal seat, polished smooth by 3 generations of Mercers. Cal called it Ruth. Nobody else did. At Dottie's Cafe, they called it the Tin Coffin. Every morning before sunup, farmers, mechanics, seed salesmen, and retired men with nowhere better to be crowded into Dottie's for coffee strong enough to float a bolt. Cal sat at the end of the counter beneath a mounted base that had been gathering dust since 1987. The jokes usually arrived before the eggs. Cal, one of the younger hands said one October morning, grinning into his phone, saw a scrap buyer from Wichita on Facebook. Want me to tag you? A few men chuckled. Cal didn't look up from his coffee. Only if he pays by stubbornness. That machine weighs about 9 tons of it. The bell above the door rang, and the room changed temperature. Grant Vale walked in wearing a soft-shell jacket with the Vale Harvest logo stitched over the heart. He was 36, clean-shaven, bright-eyed, and always looked as if he had just stepped out of a conference room, even when he was standing in dust. He had taken over his father's operation and transformed it into something Bellwether had never seen. 6,000 leased acres, investor money from Denver, drones that flew grid patterns over the crop, soil probes that sent hourly reports, and 3 autonomous Titan Ridge X9 combines that could cut through a field without a human touching the wheel. A fourth machine had arrived 2 days earlier on a lowboy trailer, huge and spotless and bright yellow, with LiDAR domes perched on the roof like insect eyes. Grant set his travel mug on the counter beside Cal. "Morning, Mr. Mercer," he said, loud enough for the room. "I drove past your place. Thought maybe the county had finally put a historic marker on that combine." Cal turned the spoon in his coffee. "Morning, Grant." I could help you out," Grant said. "My new X9 maps crop density in real time, adjusts rotor speed automatically, and sends yield reports before the grain even hits the truck. You could finish your whole place before lunch." "I don't mind working past lunch." Grant smiled like he was being patient with a child. "That's the problem. You still think farming is about suffering. It isn't. It's optimization, precision, scale. Machines talk to satellites. Farms run on data now." Cal finally looked at him. His eyes were pale gray and clear. "Farms run on weather," Cal said. "Then soil, then people. Data comes in after that." The cafe went quiet enough for the grill to sound loud. Grant tilted his head. "That philosophy paying your note this year?" Cal's jaw tightened. Everyone in Bellwether knew about the node. The bank had rolled Cal's operating debt twice after 2 bad seasons and a hail claim that paid late. The next payment was due in November. If he missed it, the Mercer ground could go to auction, and Grant Vale had been waiting. "My offer still stands," Grant said. 30% over appraisal. You keep the house if you want it. I'll tear down the barn, clean up the equipment, put the acreage under one management plan. You get to stop fighting time. Cal picked up his coffee and took a slow drink. "The ground isn't tired of me yet." Grant laughed once, not mean exactly, but sharp. "Ground doesn't care who owns it, Cal. Whoever runs it best keeps it." Cal put money on the counter and stood. "You might be right," he said. "But best doesn't always mean newest." For the next 9 days, Cal worked inside the barn from dark to dark. He didn't have a diagnostics tablet. He had coffee cans full of bolts, a shop manual with oil fingerprints across the diagrams, and a memory for every sound Ruth had ever made. He pulled the carburetor apart on a cracked wooden bench and set the pieces in a muffin tin so nothing could roll away. He cleaned the brass jets with a strand from an old wire brush. He cut a new gasket by hand. He checked the float height with a pocket ruler his father had carried in Vietnam. The Gleaner's engine was a Chevy 292 inline-6, simple as a hammer and twice as loyal. Fuel, air, spark, compression. Cal liked machines that told the truth in 4 words. He filed the ignition points, he replaced 2 belts, he adjusted the straw walkers until the old linkage snapped cleanly into place. He greased every Zerk fitting he could reach, then found 3 more under dirt he had missed the year before. When the wind shifted, he could hear Grant's farm across the section. Not engines, fans, generators. A soft electrical hum from the new command center Grant had built beside the grain legs. The building had tinted glass, radiant floors, and a server room colder than a meat locker. People came from out of state to tour it. On Tuesday afternoon, Grant hosted 6 investors and a regional banker inside that building, while his X9 combines sat lined up outside like trophies. "Gentlemen," Grant said, standing before a wall of screens, "this is not just harvest equipment. This is a closed-loop production ecosystem. A map of Bellwether County glowed behind him. Colored icons moved across digital fields. The Titan Ridge machines receive RTK correction through SkyFurrowNet. They adjust header height, ground speed, rotor load, and grain loss without operator input. Manual control is intentionally limited. That protects the asset, protects the crop, and protects the operator. Lydia Pratt, the banker, lifted one eyebrow. Limited how? Grant clicked to the next slide. If the onboard system detects a navigation error, a tamper attempt, or a safety fault, the machine locks out until a certified dealer clears it. Meaning your people can't override it? They don't need to, Grant said. The network has a 99.98% uptime record. We use triple redundancy. The future of agriculture is removing human error from the critical path. The investors nodded. Outside, 3 machine operators leaned against the bright yellow combines, scrolling their phones in the shade. None of them had ever adjusted concaves by ear. None of them had ever changed a feeder chain in sleet. They didn't have to. That was the point. Grant believed that with the kind of confidence only possible when the weather had not yet disagreed. That same evening, a black SUV rolled into Cal's yard. Lydia Pratt stepped out in boots too clean for October and a wool coat buttoned to the throat. She carried a folder against her chest and looked at the Gleaner as if it might stain her by existing. Cal wiped his hands on a rag. "Evening, Lydia." "Cal," she said. "I won't waste your time. The board reviewed your file this morning." "That a friendly sentence?" "No." He looked past her to the wheat stubble glowing gold under the low sun. He had already started his own harvest. Ruth had cut clean for 2 days, slow but steady. He still had 90 acres standing. Lydia opened the folder. "Your payment is due November 3rd. Based on commodity prices and your yield estimates, you may come up short even if you finish every acre." "I'll finish." "That's not the issue." "It is to me." She sighed. "Grant Vale has made a formal offer to purchase the Mercer acreage at a premium. The bank views it as a practical exit. You could clear your debt, keep your dignity, and avoid foreclosure." Cal looked at the old combine behind him. "My father bought Ruth used in 1971, he said. "The first year he had her, a hailstorm took the south half of the county. He ran this machine for neighbors for 18 straight hours, because back then, nobody asked if a man's field deserved saving. They just went." Lydia softened, but only a little. "Sentiment doesn't service debt." "No," Cal said. "Harvest does." "Cal, if the note fails, I can't protect you." He folded the rag slowly. "Then don't. Just make sure the payoff amount is right when I bring it." Lydia closed the folder and looked at him the way people look at old houses before demolition. "I hope you're right." "So do I." The storm got its name on Wednesday morning. The local meteorologist called it the Black Anvil Front, because the radar showed a bruised mass dropping southeast out of Colorado, dragging cold air behind it like a blade. By noon, the forecast changed from heavy rain to severe hail. By 2, they added a freeze warning. By 4, everyone in Bellwether understood the same thing. Any wheat left standing after dark might not be worth cutting by morning. Cal was already moving. Ruth crawled across his last field with a dry roar, sickle flashing, Reel turning, straw pouring out the back in a dusty ribbon. There was no autopilot, no screen, no climate control. Cal steered with one hand and rested the other on the throttle, feeling the engine load through his boots. At 5:12 p.m., he finished his final pass. He let the machine idle at the edge of the field while the last grain rattled into the tank. His bins were not full, but they were full enough. He had a crop. He had a chance. Across the road, Grant Vale did not yet know he had none. At 5:19 p.m., Vale Harvest Systems was still ahead of schedule. 4 Titan Ridge X9 combines were cutting Grant's wheat in perfect formation across the North Block. Grain carts moved like chess pieces. Trucks waited on the gravel access road. The command center screens showed moisture at 12.7%, yield above projection, and storm arrival at 6:42. Grant stood with a headset on, smiling despite the pressure. "We keep this pace," his operations lead said. "We clear North Block by 6:10, South Pivot by 8 if the hail holds." Grant nodded. "Good. Tell the drivers no empty minutes." Then every icon on the wall stopped. At first, no one moved. The room simply stared at the map, waiting for the icons to jump forward. They didn't. A red box opened across the main screen. Network authenticative failure. Position into Getty fault. Saved information the implementation added mentioned. Why the shape that worked were more that were share than they redo. Network authentication failure. Position into Getty fault. Saved information the important. The network authentication failure. Position into Getty fault. Saved information the improtective like them. Then every icon on the wall stopped, did not move. Integrity fault. Safety lock engaged. The radios erupted. "Command, this is Unit 1. I lost steering. Unit 3 just killed rotor. My screen's locked. Throttle's dead. Brake engaged. I can't move." Grant grabbed the nearest console. "Reboot the base station." "We did." "Switch to cellular correction." "Already dropped." "Local fallback." The operations lead looked up, face drained. "There isn't one. The firmware update last night disabled local fallback until dealer certification." Grant didn't answer. He ran. Out in the field, the big yellow machines sat silent with wheat pressed against their headers. Grant climbed into Unit 2 and slapped at the screen. The cab smelled new, like plastic and ozone. The machine was beautiful. Useless, but beautiful. He opened a panel beneath the armrest. Sealed modules, tamper labels, no linkage, no cable to pull. No lever that did anything without permission from software. He called Titan Ridge Priority Support. A bright recorded voice thanked him for being a valued enterprise partner and informed him that SkyFurrowNet was experiencing a multi-state authentication outage affecting connected equipment across the Central Plains. Estimated restoration time, 48 to 72 hours. Grant felt the words pass through him without finding anything solid. 48 hours. The hail was less than an hour away. He stepped down from the cab. The wind hit him with the smell of ice. The western sky was nearly black now, flickering inside itself. His operations lead stood beside the ladder. What do we do? Grant looked at 6,000 acres of business plan, leverage, investor trust, land payments, equipment loans, and reputation. Then he looked at the machines. They knew moisture. They knew slope. They knew grain loss. They knew GPS position to the inch. They did not know how to disobey. Grant sank to one knee in the mud. From the road behind him, a sound rose through the wind. Cough, bang, roar. Cal Mercer drove Ruth out of the dusk with one headlight brighter than the other, and the old unloading auger folded like a crooked elbow. The Gleaner rattled so hard, loose straw shook off the frame. Its patched metal looked almost white under the stormlight. Cal pulled alongside the dead Titan ridge and throttled down. Grant stood slowly. Cal leaned over the rail. "Looks quiet over here." Grant swallowed whatever pride was left in his throat. The network bricked them. "Can you clear it?" "No." "Can you tow them?" "No. Brakes are locked." "Can you drive them?" Grant looked at the sealed machine behind him. "No." Cal nodded once, not gloating, not smiling. "How many acres left?" "Too many." "Number?" "Roughly 900 before the hail line. More south, but if we save the north block, I can meet contracts." Cal looked at the wheat, then at the sky. "One old Gleaner won't cut 900 acres." "I know." Cal reached under the dash and pulled out a scratched CB microphone, the color of old bone. "Channel 12, he said into it. "This is Mercer. Anybody with iron and fuel, come back." Static answered first, then a voice. "I hear you, Cal. This is Boone." Another. "Harper here. You looking at that sky?" "I'm looking at Vale's north block," Cal said. "His computer rigs are locked. Wheat is standing. Hail's close." A pause. Then Boone said, "Vale? The boy who called my 7720 a liability at the co-op?" "Same boy." A third voice joined, rough with age. "He tried to rent my east quarter out from under me." Cal kept his eyes on Grant. "That wheat doesn't know who signed the checks," he said. "And this county doesn't leave a harvest to die if a man can still cut." The radio stayed silent for 3 seconds. Then Harper said, "My old case has fuel." Boone said, "I can bring the deer, but the cab fan's out." "Bring lights," Cal said. "Bring chains. Bring whatever still turns. North block. Now." Grant looked at him, stunned. "Why?" Cal pushed the microphone back under the dash. "Because I remember when your dad came with a grain truck the year my mother broke her hip," Cal said. "Because weather is mean enough without neighbors helping it. And because if we let the crop rot just to prove a point, then the machines aren't the only things that failed." By 6:25, the North Block had become a battlefield of old iron. Boone Haskell arrived in a green John Deere with paint rubbed off the ladder. Harper Doss brought a red Case 1680 that smoked when it turned uphill. Twin brothers from the edge of town came with a grain cart held together by welds that looked like lightning scars. Tom Alvarez, who ran the implement shop, pulled in with a flatbed full of belts, chain, grease, lights, and coffee in dented thermoses. The Titan Ridge combines sat dead among them, sleek and enormous and mute. Cal led the first pass. Ruth's header dropped into the wheat, and the old machine lunged forward as if offended by the idea of sitting still. Straw flew, grain rattled. The engine settled into a hard, steady pull. Grant had no job at first except to stay out of the way. Then Cal pointed at him from the seat. "You got trucks?" "Yes." "Use them." Grant ran. For the first time in years, Grant Vale worked without a dashboard telling him what mattered. He moved trucks by headlights and hand signals. He watched augers swing over beds. He yelled into radios until his voice went raw. He learned fast that old farmers did not waste words when weather was coming. At 7:08, the first hailstones hit. Small ones, dry clicks against metal. Nobody stopped. At 7:41, Ruth broke. Grant was driving alongside with a grain cart when he heard a crack like a rifle shot from inside the old combine. Cal cut the throttle instantly. The header coasted down. The machine gave one wounded clatter and went still. Grant jumped out and ran through wheat whipping in the wind. Cal had already opened the side panel. A length of chain hung loose from the clean grain elevator. One master link sheared clean through. Without it, the harvested grain couldn't climb into the tank. The machine could cut, thresh, and separate, but it could not carry what it saved. "Tell me you have another link," Grant said. Cal's flashlight beam stayed still on the broken chain. "Not this size." Tom Alvarez climbed up behind him and cursed softly. "Number 62 double pitch. Haven't stocked that since my dad ran the old shop." "Where is one?" Tom looked toward town. "Maybe at the fairground shed? The old county thresher uses the same pitch. Shed's locked." Grant pulled his keys from his pocket. "Who has the key?" "Mabel Reed." Grant stared. "The librarian?" Tom nodded. "She runs the Historical Equipment Club." Cal looked at Grant. "You want this machine back in the cut, you go ask Mabel Reed for a favor. Not buy. Ask." Grant took off. He drove too fast down roads already slick with rain. The first wave of hail was tapping harder now. He reached the small brick library as the streetlights flickered. Mabel Reed was standing under the awning with a raincoat over her pajamas and a ring of keys in her hand. "Tom called," she said. Grant stopped in front of her, breathing hard. "Mrs. Reed, I need the shed key." She looked at him over the top of her glasses. "No, Mr. Vale, you need a chain link." "Yes, ma'am." "And you need it from equipment your company called inefficient scrap when the county asked for sponsorship money." Grant closed his eyes once. "Yes, ma'am." Mabel stepped closer. "Cal Mercer fixed my furnace one January night and wouldn't take money. Harper Doss mowed the cemetery when my husband died. Boone brought hay to my sister through a blizzard. That is why I am awake, not because Vale Harvest needs saving." Grant nodded. There was nothing to defend. "I understand." "Do you?" He looked down at his hands, still clean at that point, and hated them. "I think I'm starting to." Mabel handed in the keys. "Then bring it back, and don't bend the thresher door." When Grant returned, the storm had teeth. Rain blew sideways in silver sheets. Hailstones bounced under the truck tires. The old combines still moved in the dark wherever they could, their lights cutting tunnels through dust, rain, and chaff. Ruth waited with her side open. Grant ran the part to Cal. "I need your hands," Cal shouted. Grant hesitated only because he did not know where to put them. Cal shoved a wrench into his chest. "Hold the tensioner back. When I say, you pull. If it slips, it takes skin." Grant climbed onto the slick platform. Rain ran down his collar. Grease blackened his palms. He braced the wrench against the sprocket housing and pulled until his shoulders burned. "More," Cal barked. Grant pulled. The wrench jumped and tore a strip of skin off his knuckles. He swore but did not let go. Cal slid the master link into place with fingers steadier than the weather had any right to allow. Tom clipped the plate. Boone held the flashlight. Harper hammered the retaining clip home. "Ease it," Cal said. Grant released the tensioner. The chain seated, Cal slapped the panel shut. "Now we find out if she forgives us." He hit the starter. Ruth coughed once, twice, then roared back into the storm. Grant looked at his bleeding hand, then at the old machine. Something in him shifted so quietly he almost missed it. He had spent years thinking competence was something you purchased, installed, and updated. Here it was, standing in freezing rain, passed from one scarred hand to another. By midnight, the world had narrowed to light, noise, and wheat. The old machines ran in staggered formation. Their headers chewed through the north block, while the dead Titan Ridge fleet loomed like abandoned buildings. Grain trucks crawled to the bins and back. The air smelled of diesel smoke, wet straw, hot bearings, and ice. Cal was still en route. He sat exposed to the weather, shoulders hunched, cap pulled low, one gloved hand locked around the wheel. Every few minutes, he lifted his chin toward the sound of the engine, listening for trouble nobody else would catch. Grant watched him from the grain cart and began to worry. At 1:17 a.m., Ruth drifted offline. It was only a few feet, but Cal Mercer did not drift. Not in a field, not with wheat standing. Grant shined a spotlight toward the platform and saw Cal slumped forward, one hand still on the wheel, the other clutching his chest. "Cal!" The old man's eyes opened halfway. "Line's crooked." "You're done." "No." Cal's voice came out like gravel. "Header freezes if she sits. Wheat's icing over. You stop now, you'll plug every machine behind me." "I can't drive this." Cal grabbed his sleeve with surprising strength. "Yes, you can. Wheel. Throttle. Header. Listen." Grant looked at the controls. No screen. No joystick. No seat suspension. No sealed comfort. Just levers, pedals, a wheel that looked too big, and a machine shaking beneath him like a living thing. "Cal, I don't know what I'm doing." "Then learn fast." Grant pulled him back from the seat and lowered him to the platform behind the shield, out of the worst wind. He stripped off his jacket and wrapped it over Cal's shoulders. Then he sat down. The wheel fought him immediately. The Gleaner wanted muscle. The row ahead vanished into a tunnel of light and sleet. Wheat fed into the header with a dry, frantic whisper. The engine bogged. Grant panicked, reached for the wrong lever, and nearly lifted the reel too high. Cal's voice rasped behind him. "Not that one. Short lever. 2 fingers. Don't argue with her." Grant found it, nudged the header up. The engine recovered. A second later, the machine surged as the crop thinned. "Throttle down a hair," Cal said. Grant eased the lever back. The roar steadied. For the next 20 minutes, Cal taught with fragments and coughs. "Feel the mud. Don't chase the row, lead it. Auger light means truck. If she rattles high, you're starving her. Listen before you touch." Grant listened, not to data, to metal. He heard when the cylinder loaded, heard when the fan cleared chaff, felt when the drive tires bit and when the soil dragged at the left wheel. The old machine did not hide anything from him. It punished ignorance immediately and rewarded attention just as fast. His hands were bleeding again, his clothes were soaked, his expensive boots were packed with mud, and for the first time in his life, Grant Vale was not managing a harvest, he was harvesting. At 2:46 a.m., the hail turned to ice pellets and the wheat began to glaze. The old machines screamed in protest, but the north block was almost done. Boone's deer cut the west strip. Harper's case took the low ground. Ruth, with Grant at the wheel and Cal half-conscious behind him, drove the center line. The final rows stood ahead like a dare. Grant pushed the throttle forward. The Gleaner's engine deepened, the header rattled, then settled. Wheat vanished into it. Grain poured from the auger into the truck beside him in a golden stream lit by halogen glare. At 3:11 a.m., Ruth broke through the last row onto the access road. Grant shoved the clutch down and pulled the throttle back. Boone emerged on the left. Harper emerged on the right. The three combines idled side by side under the storm, old irons steaming in the cold like exhausted horses. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then the radio crackled. "North block is clean." Grant looked back at the field. Clean. He turned to Cal. The old man was not smiling anymore. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. "Cal?" No answer. Everything that had been victory became emergency. Grant lifted Cal with Boone and Harper's help, nearly dropping him once because the latter was glazed with ice. They laid him across the back seat of Grant's pickup. Harper called dispatch. Boone shoved a wool blanket over Cal. Grant drove toward the highway with the heater blasting and fear tearing through him worse than the storm. The ambulance met them at the county line. A paramedic took one look at Cal and began shouting instructions. Hypothermia, possible cardiac event, oxygen, monitor, move. Grant stood in the sleet while they loaded the man who had saved him into the back of the ambulance. Cal's cap lay on the truck floor, soaked and flattened. Grant picked it up with both hands. The hospital waiting room in Bellwether was too bright for what the night had been. Grant sat with his elbows on his knees, wearing a borrowed sweatshirt and bandages around both hands. Boone slept with his chin on his chest. Harper paced. Tom Alvarez stood by the vending machine and did not buy anything. At 6:40 a.m., a doctor came through the double doors. "Cal Mercer?" Everyone stood. The doctor looked tired but not hopeless. "He had a mild heart attack, complicated by severe exposure. We stabilized him. He's awake and he's angry, which I am told is normal." Boone laughed once and covered his face. Grant felt his knees weaken. "Can I see him?" he asked. The doctor looked from Grant to the others. Harper nodded. "Let the kid go." Cal looked smaller in the hospital bed. Tubes ran under his nose. A monitor kept time beside him. His eyes opened when Grant stepped in. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Cal whispered, "Did you bring my cap?" Grant held it up. "Good. Thought you might have let some nurse throw it away." Grant set the cap on the chair. "We finished the north block." "I know." "All of it." Cal's mouth twitched. "You freeze Ruth?" "No." "Plug her?" "Almost." "Break anything?" Grant looked at his bandaged hands. "Me, mostly." That got the faintest smile. Grant stepped closer. The apology he had been carrying felt too large for language. "I was wrong," he said. Cal closed his eyes. "I treated people like inefficiency. I treated machines like status. I tried to buy your ground because a spreadsheet told me it fit. Then you came out in a storm and saved my farm." Cal opened his eyes again. "I didn't save your farm. We saved your wheat." "Same thing." "No," Cal said. "Not the same. A farm isn't acreage. It isn't equipment. It isn't even a crop. A farm is whether somebody shows up when the sky turns black." Grant looked down. "I don't know how to repay that." "Start by remembering it." By 10 that morning, the Black Anvil front had moved east, leaving broken branches, shredded fields, and a county covered in ice. Reports came in all day. Uncut wheat across 3 counties had been flattened and shattered. Insurance adjusters were overwhelmed before lunch. Vale Harvest's North Block was in the bins. That single fact changed everything. Lydia Pratt arrived at Grant's office just after noon with a folder under her arm and a look on her face that said she had already done the math. "Remarkable outcome," she said. "I heard you managed to salvage your highest value acreage." Grant stood behind his desk, staring through the window at the dead Titan Ridge combines still sitting in the field. "We didn't salvage it," he said. "People did." Lydia smiled politely and opened the folder. "Cal Mercer, unfortunately, may not be in a position to complete his financial obligations. Given his hospitalization, the bank will need to reassess risk. Your prior offer for the Mercer acreage could be revived quickly." Grant turned from the window. A day earlier, he would have reached for a pen. Instead, he took the folder, closed it, and placed it back in Lydia's hands. "No." She blinked. "No?" "No offer, no foreclosure pressure, no auction games." "Grant, this is prime ground. It connects your west pivot to the rail spur." "I know exactly what it connects." "Then be practical." "I am." He opened a drawer and pulled out his checkbook. "What's Cal's payoff?" "I can't disclose." "Don't perform policy at me, Lydia. The lien documents are filed. Principal, interest, fees. Number." She hesitated. 412,000 and change. Grant wrote the check slowly. "Make it 425. Any surplus goes to his operating account." Lydia stared at him. "You're paying off his note?" "I'm paying an invoice." "For what?" Grant's voice hardened. "For 900 acres of wheat, 1 ruined storm, 20 years of arrogance, and 1 old man nearly dying because my perfect system couldn't move without permission from a server." "This is not a normal business decision." "No," Grant said. "It's a correct one." After she left, Titan Ridge called. The regional vice president was smooth, apologetic, and careful. "Grant, first, we want you to know how seriously we take this outage. A patch is rolling out tonight. As a goodwill gesture, we're crediting 3 months of network subscription fees." Grant looked at his bandaged hands. "Come pick up your machines." A pause. "Excuse me?" "The X9s. Pick them up." "Grant, they're under lease lock. Early termination penalties are substantial." "Then send me the bill. If you remove certified software or bypass the safety architecture, The units will permanently disable. Grant almost laughed. Last night, I watched a 71-year-old man repair a clean grain elevator in freezing rain with a librarian's thresher part, he said. You are threatening me with inconvenience. These machines cannot operate outside our ecosystem. Then they're not machines, they're subscriptions with tires. The line went quiet. Grant continued. I'll keep one after my lawyers finish bleeding over the contract. Not because I trust your network, because I'm going to rebuild it with manual controls, local fallback, and parts my people can touch. If your company doesn't like that, take them all. You'll void the warranty. Grant looked out at the field where Ruth had cut the last row. Good. Spring came late to Bellwether. Snowmelt filled the ditches. The wheat that had survived greened up along the county roads. At Dottie's Cafe, the morning crowd returned to arguing about rain, seed prices, and whether the new waitress made coffee too weak. The bell rang at 6:03. Cal Mercer walked in with a cane in one hand and the same old cap on his head. The room went quiet, then loud all at once. Chairs scraped. Men clapped him on the back too gently. Dottie cried and pretended she didn't. Cal made his way toward the end of the counter, but his stool was occupied. Grant Vale sat there in faded work pants, a denim jacket, and boots that looked like they had finally earned the right to be dirty. Cal stopped beside him. You're in my spot. Grant slid over. Saved it warm. Didn't ask you to. Didn't ask permission. Cal grunted, but he sat. Things had changed in Bellwether. Not dramatically enough for newspapers, but deeply enough for people who knew where to look. Grant sold 2 of the Titan Ridge combines and used the loss as tuition. He hired Tom Alvarez full-time and turned the old feed warehouse near the rail spur into an independent repair shop. Any farmer in the county could bring in an older machine and pay cost on parts until harvest debt cleared. The remaining Titan Ridge machines no longer ran as sealed gods. Tom and a retired engineer from Salina tore into them, added local control hardware, mechanical emergency release, and a physical throttle. The cabs still had screens, but now the machines also had levers. Grant started showing up at Dottie's without presentation slides. He listened more than he talked. Some men forgave him quickly. Some didn't. Bellwether had long memory, but it respected work, and Grant worked. After breakfast, he drove Cal home. They rode with the windows cracked, warm air smelling of thawed dirt, and diesel drifting through the cab. When the pickup turned into Cal's lane, the barn came into view. Cal said nothing. Ruth sat outside in the morning sun. The old Gleaner had been restored over the winter, not overdone, not turned into a parade toy. Restored like a working machine deserved to be restored. New bearings, new chains, fresh belts, straightened panels, a coat of silver paint bright enough to catch the sky. The red stripe along the side was clean again. Cal climbed out slowly and walked to her. His hand rested on the metal side panel. For a while, he just stood there. Grant leaned against the truck. Tom did the mechanical work. Boone found the decals. Mabel made us promise not to make it too shiny. Cal ran his fingers along the red stripe. You paid for this? Some of it. How much? Enough for you to get mad about. Cal's eyes stayed on the machine. I'm too tired to yell. Good. The old man looked back at him. You understand she's not a monument. Grant nodded. She's a combine. That means she works. I know. Cal looked toward the fields where the first green rows of spring were beginning to show. You still believe farms run on data? Grant considered the question. I believe data helps, he said, when it remembers its place. Cal tapped Ruth's side panel with 2 knuckles. The sound was solid, honest, final. She never needed a signal to know where the field was, he said. The 2 men stood beside the old machine while the sun climbed over Bellwether County. Behind them, the world kept inventing newer ways to forget what mattered. Ahead of them, the soil waited. And when the next harvest came, Ruth would not ask a satellite for permission to begin.